The folder hit the counter like a verdict. Rowena Calder's hands stopped mid-stitch. The fluorescent light above her hummed its usual complaint, but everything else in the small tailor shop went dead silent. 3 strangers stood inside her door. 2 men in coats that cost more than her monthly rent. 1 woman in a gray suit, her face arranged into the kind of calm that preceded earthquakes. The woman stepped forward, placed 1 manicured finger on the folder. "Ms. Rowena Calder?" Rowena didn't answer. Her eyes locked onto the bold letters visible through the folder's clear cover. Notice of legal transfer and immediate property action. Her throat tightened. Eviction. It had to be eviction. The landlord had been circling for months, sending hints wrapped in smiles. Now the wolves had arrived in expensive wool. "I asked if you are Rowena Calder," the woman repeated. "Yes." The word came out smaller than Rowena intended. She hated that. What would you do if lawyers showed up at your door with documents you never expected? "Before we continue, I need to ask you something. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter." Now, let's get back to Rowena. The woman's name was Celine Maris. She introduced herself without warmth, without apology. "Counsel representing the Wainwright estate." Estate. The word hung in the air like smoke. Rowena knew that name. Everyone in Cleveland knew that name. Cyrus Wainwright. The billionaire buying up half the old mill district. The ghost who never showed his face while his company pushed out families, shuttered shops, and turned history into luxury condos. But estate meant something else entirely. Estate meant death. Estate meant lawyers picking through the bones of what remained. "Is he dead?" Rowena whispered. Celine's expression flickered, just barely. "Mr. Wainwright's status is not your immediate concern. What concerns you, Ms. Calder, is what happened in this shop yesterday at approximately 4:17 in the afternoon." Yesterday. 4:17. The man with the torn suit. Rowena remembered him walking in. Expensive clothes, tired eyes. A charcoal jacket with a split seam along the shoulder. Not from wear. From force. Someone had grabbed that man hard enough to tear the fabric. He had asked her to fix it. Said he could pay. She remembered how he stood in her doorway like he was waiting for permission to exist. And she remembered what she did next. She fixed his jacket for free. No charge. Not a single dollar. Because something in his face told her he had already paid enough that day. For what, she didn't know. She didn't ask. That wasn't her business. Her business was thread and needle and making people look right for the moments that mattered. Now lawyers stood in her shop because of a kindness she offered to a stranger. "I didn't do anything wrong," Rowena said, her voice steadier now. "He brought a suit. I fixed it. That's all." Celine slid the folder closer. "You repaired a garment without accepting payment." "Yes." "And you're aware of who that man was?" Rowena hesitated. "He said his name was Cyrus. Cyrus Wainwright." Celine let the name settle. "And your decision to refuse his money may have set into motion something that cannot be undone." The 2 men behind Celine exchanged a glance that Rowena couldn't read. One of them had already pulled out a phone, typing something urgent. The other watched Rowena the way people watch evidence. "What do you mean, can't be undone?" Rowena asked. Celine opened the folder. Inside, Rowena saw documents thick with legal language. Signatures. Timestamps. Her shop's address printed in bold on the 3rd page, listed under something called a protective holding structure. "Mr. Wainwright attended a board meeting yesterday evening," Celine said. "The meeting did not go as the public believes it did. And the first thing he did after leaving the shop was activate a legal mechanism that has frozen significant portions of his company's assets." Rowena felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "I don't understand." "You will." Celine straightened. "Because as of 9 o'clock this morning, your business has been placed under the legal protection of the Wainwright Trust. And there are people who will do anything to remove that protection." Before Rowena could respond, one of the men stepped forward. His phone buzzed again. "They've already filed," he said to Celine. "Emergency motion. They're claiming fraud." Celine's jaw tightened. She turned back to Rowena, and for the first time, something almost human flickered in her eyes. "Ms. Calder," she said quietly, "I need you to understand something. By sunset today, you may be served with papers accusing you of manipulating a billionaire for personal gain. And the people who filed those papers? They don't lose." Rowena stood frozen behind her counter, 72 years old, a widow for 12 years, a woman who still folded tissue paper like it cost money because it did. And somewhere in this city, powerful men were already sharpening their knives. The bell on her door had never sounded so loud. The documents spread across Rowena's counter like a map to somewhere she never asked to go. Celine Maris pointed to a paragraph on the second page. "This section grants your property provisional immunity from seizure, foreclosure, or forced sale for a period of 18 months. Rowena stared at the words. They blurred together. Legal language wasn't designed for people like her. It was designed to keep people like her out. "Why would he do this?" Rowena asked. "I fixed his jacket. That's all. I've never met him before in my life." "That's precisely why." Celine's voice carried no emotion, only information. "Mr. Wainwright has spent the last 2 years watching his company displace over 40 small businesses in this district. Yours was scheduled to be the 41st. Rowena's chest went cold. "What?" "Your landlord, Gerald Hoffman. He's been negotiating a buyout with Wainwright Holdings for the past 6 months. The deal was set to close next week. Your lease termination notice was already drafted." The room seemed to shrink. Rowena had known Gerald was circling. She had felt it in his smile, in his casual mentions of market value. But seeing it confirmed in black and white was different. This was proof that her life had been scheduled for demolition, and no one had bothered to tell her. "I was going to lose my shop," Rowena said slowly, "and nobody thought to warn me. Warnings don't generate profit." Celine closed the folder. "But Mr. Wainwright saw something yesterday that changed his calculations." "What could he possibly have seen?" Celine paused. It was the first time she seemed to measure her words carefully. "He asked me one question after he left your shop. Just one." She met Rowena's eyes. He asked, "Who still lives here?" Not who owns property. Not who holds leases. Who still lives here. As if the answer mattered. Rowena thought of her customers. Nurses coming off night shifts. Warehouse workers needing pants hemmed before interviews. Church ladies wanting their Sunday best pressed just right. Teenagers borrowing confidence from a well-fitted jacket. These were the people who still lived here. The ones nobody counted because they didn't count toward profit margins. "So he protected my shop," Rowena said. "What happens now?" Celine's expression hardened. "Now you become a target." She pulled out a second folder, thinner than the first. Inside was a photograph of a man Rowena didn't recognize. Silver hair, expensive tan, teeth too white to be natural. "Marcus Thorne," Celine said. "Chairman of Wainwright Holdings Board of Directors. He's been pushing for aggressive expansion for 3 years. When Mr. Wainwright activated the trust, he effectively froze Thorne's ability to move forward with any new acquisitions. And this man is coming after me? He's already started." Celine tapped the photograph. "The emergency motion claiming fraud? That's his opening move. He's arguing that you somehow influenced or manipulated Mr. Wainwright during a vulnerable moment. That the protection order is invalid because it was obtained through deception." Rowena almost laughed. "Almost. I'm a 72-year-old seamstress. I don't even own a computer. How could I possibly manipulate a billionaire? It doesn't matter if the accusation is true. It only matters if it creates enough doubt to delay the protection. And while the protection is delayed, Thorne can push through the original sale. Your shop gets demolished. The precedent gets set. And Mr. Wainwright's attempt to change course dies in legal limbo." Rowena lowered herself into the wooden chair behind her counter. Her old sewing machine sat beside her, the one Emmett had bought 30 years ago. It had been making a strange sound lately. A cough. A warning. Everything she had built was balanced on a thread. "What do I do?" she asked. Celine gathered the documents. "For now, you do nothing. You continue your work. You don't speak to reporters, landlords, or anyone who claims to represent the city. My team will handle the legal response. And if they come here? If they try to force me out before your response is ready? Celine paused at the door. The two men flanked her like shadows. Ms. Calder, she said, this shop is now legally documented as a protected site under the Wainwright Trust. Anyone who attempts to interfere with your business before the hearing is committing a federal offense. She opened the door. The bell stuck, then released with a weak chime. But I should warn you, Celine added, Marcus Thorne has never let federal law slow him down before. The door closed. The shop fell silent. Rowena sat alone with documents she couldn't fully understand, enemies she had never met, and a billionaire's protection she had never asked for. And somewhere across the city, someone was already challenging every word of it. She looked at the photograph of Marcus Thorne one more time. His smile looked like a threat wrapped in politeness. The clock on her wall read 9:47 a.m. By sunset, Celine had said. By sunset, the first blow would land. Rowena's hands trembled as she reached for her needle and thread. It was the only thing she knew how to do. The only thing that had ever made sense. But even her hands couldn't stitch together a defense against what was coming. Celine Maris returned at 2:15 p.m. This time, she came alone. Rowena was hemming a pair of slacks for a hospital janitor named Doris when the bell chimed. She looked up to find Celine standing just inside the doorway, her gray suit unchanged but her face carrying something new. Tension. The kind that lived in the jaw and the shoulders. We need to talk, Celine said. Privately. Doris glanced between them, clutching her claim ticket. Rowena handed over the finished slacks with a gentle smile. No charge today, honey. You take care of people all night. Let me take care of this one. Doris thanked her 3 times before leaving. The bell stuck again on her way out. Celine waited until the door closed completely. The board meeting, she began, was not a normal corporate proceeding. It was an ambush. Rowena set down her needle. What do you mean? Mr. Wainwright walked into that room expecting a quarterly review. Instead, he found 14 board members demanding his resignation. They had documents prepared, testimony lined up, allegations of financial mismanagement, emotional instability, and failure to act in shareholder interest. They tried to remove him from his own company? They tried to destroy him. Celine moved closer to the counter. Marcus Thorne has been building this case for over a year. He had private investigators following Mr. Wainwright. He had accountants combing through every transaction. He even had a psychologist prepared to testify that Mr. Wainwright was suffering from depression severe enough to impair his judgment. Rowena thought of the man who had stood in her shop yesterday. The tiredness in his eyes. The careful way he held himself, like someone expecting to be hit. The tear in his jacket, Rowena said quietly. Someone grabbed him. Celine nodded. Thorne's head of security. A man named Victor Kessler. When Mr. Wainwright refused to sign the resignation papers, Kessler physically restrained him. The tear happened when Mr. Wainwright pulled free. The image burned in Rowena's mind. A billionaire held down by his own people. His jacket torn. His power stripped away in a room full of suits and silence. And then he walked into her shop looking for someone to simply fix what was broken. Why did he come here? Rowena asked. Of all places, why my shop? Celine hesitated. It was the second time Rowena had seen her pause. Because you were supposed to be his reminder. Reminder of what? Of what his company was doing. Your shop was on the acquisition list. Your eviction was scheduled. Mr. Wainwright told me he wanted to see the places that would disappear because of decisions made in boardrooms. He wanted to look the people in the eye before he signed away their futures. Rowena felt something twist in her chest. Anger. Grief. Something harder to name. He came to watch me lose everything? He came to feel guilty about it. That's different. Celine's voice softened, just barely. But something changed when he walked through your door. Something he didn't expect. What? You treated him like a person. Not a billionaire. Not a villain. Not a symbol. Just a man with a torn jacket who needed help. Celine straightened. He told me that in his entire adult life, he cannot remember the last time someone offered him something without expecting anything in return. Rowena thought of Emmett, her late husband, and the way he used to say that kindness was the only currency that never lost its value. She had given away a free repair. She had done it because it felt right. And now a war had started because of it. The trust, Rowena said. Explain it to me. In words I can understand. Celine pulled a chair from the corner and sat across from Rowena. It was the first time she had done anything that felt human. When Mr. Wainwright left your shop, he drove directly to his lawyer's office. Within 3 hours, he had activated something called a blind protective trust. It's a legal structure that removes his personal assets from direct corporate control. The board can't touch them. They can't sell them. They can't use them as leverage. And my shop is part of that trust? Your shop, along with 37 other properties in this district, has been placed under protective status. No demolition. No forced sales. No displacement. As long as the trust remains active, those properties are legally untouchable. Rowena stared at the documents Celine had brought. Pages and pages of legal armor, built in a single night, all because she had refused to take money from a man who looked like he needed grace more than he needed a receipt. He did this for me? He did this because of you. There's a difference. Celine leaned forward. You were the first person in years who treated him like his humanity still mattered. That broke something open in him. Whether it was guilt or hope or something else entirely, I can't say. But the result is the same. He's fighting now. And you're the reason. Rowena looked at the photograph of Marcus Thorne still lying on her counter. And this man wants to destroy everything Cyrus built in one night. Yes. But what does he gain? Celine's eyes went cold. Thorne has investors waiting. Foreign money. Development contracts worth hundreds of millions. If the trust holds, those contracts collapse. If the trust falls, Thorne becomes one of the most powerful real estate developers in the Midwest. So I'm standing between him and hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, Miss Calder. You are. Rowena let the weight of that settle into her bones. A billionaire's protection. A corporate predator's fury. And a 72-year-old widow caught between them. The clock on the wall read 2:58 p.m. By sunset, Celine had said. By sunset, they would file their first attack. But the clock wasn't Rowena's only concern anymore. Celine reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. There's one more thing you need to know, she said. Your landlord, Gerald Hoffman? He's not just working with Thorne. He's Thorne's cousin. Rowena's blood went cold. The man who had smiled at her for 3 years. The man who had pretended to care about her business. The man who had promised her a fair shake. He was family to the enemy. And she had never seen it coming. The city inspector arrived at 4:02 p.m. Rowena heard the van pull up outside, saw the official seal on the door, and felt her stomach drop before the man even stepped inside. He was young, clean-shaven, carrying a clipboard thick with forms. Ms. Calder? He didn't wait for an answer. I'm conducting a routine safety inspection of commercial properties in this zone. Routine. The word dripped with dishonesty. I've never had an inspection before, Rowena said. Not in 23 years. The inspector didn't blink. New compliance initiative. Won't take long. But it did take long. He photographed every corner of her shop. He measured doorway widths. He tested electrical outlets, examined her fire extinguisher, and wrote citations for things Rowena had never heard of. The fluorescent light that flickered? Violation. The step between her back room and the main floor? Violation. The ancient sewing machine that had served her for 3 decades? Equipment safety review required. By the time he finished, Rowena held 11 citations in her trembling hands. You have 30 days to address these issues, the inspector said. Failure to comply may result in temporary closure of your business. He left without saying goodbye. Rowena stood alone in her shop, staring at the yellow carbon copies like they were death sentences. 11 violations. 30 days. Thousands of dollars she didn't have. The phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But habit won over fear. Rowena. Gerald Hoffman's voice slithered through the receiver. I heard you had some visitors today. Lawyers, was it? Rowena gripped the phone tighter. What do you want, Gerald? Just checking in. Making sure you're okay. His tone dripped with false concern. You know, I've been thinking. The market's changing. Property values are climbing. I'd hate to see you struggle with all these new compliance requirements. Get to the point. Gerald chuckled. Fine. I'm raising your rent. Effective next month. 40% increase. It's all in the lease, Rowena. Section 12, paragraph 4. Market adjustment clause. 40%. The number hit her like a fist. You can't do that. I can. I have. And honestly, Rowena, you should consider this a favor. I could have done it months ago. But I waited. Out of respect. Respect. The word tasted like poison. I know who you are, Gerald, Rowena said quietly. I know who your family is. The line went silent for 3 long seconds. Then Gerald's voice returned, colder than before. Then you know what I'm capable of, he said. Take the hint, Rowena. Walk away. Sell me the lease. Take whatever dignity you have left and disappear. Because this is just the beginning. He hung up. Rowena stood frozen in her shop, the phone still pressed to her ear. Outside, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. By sunset, Celine had said. By sunset, the first blow would land. But the blows were already falling. Inspection. Citations. Rent increase. A coordinated assault designed to crush her before she even had a chance to fight. The bell on her door rang. She looked up, expecting Celine. Expecting help. Instead, she saw 2 men step inside. One wore a dark suit, tailored and expensive. His face was hard, his jaw set like concrete. The other stood near the entrance in a long gray coat, blocking the doorway with his body. He didn't speak. He just watched. Documented. The man in the suit walked toward Rowena slowly. His shoes clicked against the worn tile floor. Thread spools on her work table rattled with each step. Ms. Calder, he said. My name is Victor Kessler. I work for the Wainwright Holdings Board of Directors. Kessler. The name hit Rowena like ice water. The man who had grabbed Cyrus. The man who had torn his jacket. Now he was standing in her shop, close enough to touch. You have something that belongs to us, Kessler said. I don't know what you're talking about. He reached forward. His hand closed around the collar of Rowena's cardigan, twisting the fabric in his fist. She gasped, her back pressing against the wooden chair. Don't play games with me. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous. Cyrus put your little shop under legal protection. That protection is based on documentation that claims you acted without expectation of payment or reward. If I can prove otherwise, the entire trust collapses. Rowena's heart hammered against her ribs. She could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive. She could feel the heat of his grip through her clothes. I didn't take anything, she managed. I fixed his jacket. That's all. Kessler leaned closer. Then you won't mind if we take a look around. See if Mr. Wainwright left anything behind. A note. A card. A check you forgot to mention. He released her collar and stepped back. The man in the gray coat moved to the counter, opening drawers without asking. He rifled through receipts, fabric samples, spools of thread. He knocked over the framed photograph of Emmett, and the glass cracked against the wood. Rowena watched her life being searched, violated, turned inside out by men who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle. Kessler stood by the door, arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction. We'll be back, he said. And next time, we won't be asking. We'll be taking. He nodded to the man in gray. They left together, the bell sticking one final time before releasing with a weak chime. Rowena sat in the wreckage of her shop. Emmett's photograph lay cracked on the counter. Citations scattered across the floor. Her cardigan still twisted from Kessler's grip. She had done nothing wrong. She had offered kindness to a stranger. And now powerful men were tearing her world apart because of it. The sun outside dropped below the buildings. Sunset had arrived. And Rowena Calder finally understood what it meant to be stitched into the center of a war she never asked to join. The clock on the wall read 6:17 p.m. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Thorne was already planning his next move. And Rowena had no idea how to survive it. The phone rang at 7:43 a.m. Rowena hadn't slept. She had spent the night cleaning her shop, straightening the drawers Kessler's man had torn through, picking up Emmett's cracked photograph and pressing it against her chest like a prayer. The glass had cut her finger. She didn't notice until she saw blood on her cardigan. Now she sat in the same wooden chair, exhausted, listening to the phone ring. She answered on the fourth ring. "Miss Calder." Celine's voice was clipped, urgent. "We need to meet. Immediately." "What happened?" "Not over the phone. I'm sending a car. Be ready in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Rowena looked around her shop. The fluorescent light hummed. The old sewing machine sat silent in the corner. Everything looked the same as it had for decades, but nothing felt the same anymore. 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside. Rowena climbed into the back seat without asking questions. The driver said nothing. The city passed by in a blur of gray buildings and construction signs. They stopped in front of a glass tower downtown. Rowena had never been inside a building like this. The lobby alone was larger than her entire shop. Security guards nodded as Celine led her to a private elevator. "Where are we going?" Rowena finally asked. "Wainwright Legal Offices. 32nd floor." The elevator rose in silence. Rowena watched the numbers climb and felt her stomach drop with each passing floor. The doors opened to a conference room that looked like it cost more than her house. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 other lawyers sat waiting, laptops open, files spread across the table. Celine gestured for Rowena to sit. "Ms. Calder, I'm going to be direct with you. The situation has escalated faster than we anticipated." "How?" Celine slid a document across the table. "Marcus Thorne filed an emergency motion at 6 o'clock this morning. He's claiming that your interaction with Mr. Wainwright constitutes undue influence over a mentally compromised individual. He's asking the court to void the protective trust entirely." Rowena stared at the legal language. She couldn't understand most of it, but she understood enough. They were calling her a con artist. They were calling Cyrus unstable. And they were using those lies to take away everything he had tried to protect. "This is insane," Rowena said. "I didn't influence anyone. I fixed a jacket." "We know that. But Thorne has resources. He has witnesses willing to testify that Mr. Wainwright was acting erratically for months before that board meeting. He has financial experts arguing that the trust activation was impulsive, not strategic. And he has you." "What do you mean, he has me?" Celine leaned forward. "Thorne is going to argue that you saw an opportunity. An elderly widow, struggling to keep her shop open, suddenly receives legal protection from a billionaire she met once? To a jury, that sounds like manipulation. It sounds like a scam." Rowena felt the walls closing in. "But it wasn't. It wasn't anything like that. I believe you. But belief isn't evidence." Celine opened another folder. "Which is why I need to ask you something important. And I need you to answer honestly. Ask. When Mr. Wainwright came to your shop, did he leave anything behind? Anything at all? A note? A card? Something that might prove his state of mind was clear?" Rowena thought back to that afternoon. The tired eyes. The torn jacket. The way he stood in her doorway like he was waiting for permission to exist. And then she remembered. "He left a card," she said slowly, "on the counter. A business card with just a phone number. No name. No logo. He said to call if I ever needed anything." Celine's eyes sharpened. "Where is that card now?" Rowena's heart sank. "I didn't take it. I left it on the counter." "And after Kessler's visit?" The memory hit Rowena like cold water. The man in the gray coat, rifling through her drawers. The receipts scattered across the floor. The photograph knocked over. "They took it," Rowena whispered. "They must have taken it." Celine sat back. Her jaw tightened. "Then we have a problem," she said. That card was the only physical evidence of Mr. Wainwright's clear intent. Without it, Thorne's lawyers can argue that the trust was created impulsively, without prior consideration. It weakens our entire defense. Rowena felt the weight of her mistake pressing down on her shoulders. She had refused a simple kindness, a business card, a phone number, and now that refusal might cost her everything. "What do we do now?" she asked. Celine stood, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, indifferent and enormous. "We have 48 hours before the emergency hearing. Thorne will bring his witnesses. He'll bring his experts. He'll bring every piece of ammunition he has to tear down Mr. Wainwright's credibility and yours." She turned back to Rowena. "But I've spent the last 12 hours preparing our own weapons. Witnesses who saw Mr. Wainwright enter your shop. Security footage from neighboring businesses. Financial records proving that Thorne's expansion plans were dependent on your displacement. Will it be enough?" Celine didn't answer immediately. That silence said more than words ever could. "There's one more option," she said finally. "Mr. Wainwright wants to speak with you. Directly." Rowena blinked. "Cyrus wants to talk to me?" "He's been following everything since the trust was activated. He knows what Kessler did to your shop. He knows what Thorne is planning." Celine paused. "And he asked me to deliver a message." "What message?" Celine reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Rowena. Rowena unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. The note read, "I dragged you into a war you never asked to join. For that, I am sorry. But if you're willing to stand, I promise I will stand beside you. Not as a billionaire. Not as a stranger. As someone who finally remembered what it means to be decent." Rowena read the words 3 times. Her eyes burned. A billionaire was apologizing to her. A billionaire was asking to stand beside her. "What do I do?" she asked. Celine took a breath. "You have a choice, Miss Calder. You can walk away. Disappear. Let the lawyers fight this battle without you. No one would blame you." Rowena looked at the note. At the windows. At the city that had never seen her. She thought of Emmett. Of his voice saying, "Your name is the only thing you truly own, so don't rent it out for cheap." She thought of her shop. Of the nurses and warehouse workers and teenagers who came through her door needing to look right for moments that could change their lives. She thought of Kessler's hand on her collar. Of Thorne's smile in that photograph. And she made a choice. "I'm not walking away," Rowena said. "I'm not letting them win." Celine nodded slowly. "Then we have work to do." She reached for her phone and dialed a number. "Prepare the witness list," she said into the receiver. "Miss Calder is ready to fight." Rowena sat in that expensive conference room, a 72-year-old seamstress surrounded by lawyers and documents and enemies she had never asked to make. But for the first time since that folder hit her counter, she didn't feel small. She felt ready. The clock on the wall read 8:52 a.m. 47 hours until the hearing. 47 hours to prepare for the battle of her life. And somewhere across the city, Rowena knew Marcus Thorne was preparing too. What she didn't know was that Thorne had already found a witness willing to lie under oath. A witness who would claim Rowena had demanded money. A witness who would destroy everything she had built. The war was just beginning. And the next blow would come from someone Rowena never expected. The lock had been changed. Rowena stood outside her own shop at 6:47 a.m., key in hand, staring at the brass deadbolt that no longer recognized her. The morning fog hung low over the mill district, clinging to the old brick buildings like a warning. She tried the key again. Nothing. The metal scraped uselessly against a mechanism that had been replaced overnight. Her shop. Her life. Locked away behind a door she had opened 10,000 times. She pressed her palm against the glass. Inside, everything looked wrong. The mannequin had been moved. Her work table sat at an angle. Thread spools that had lived in the same spots for 20 years were scattered across the floor like casualties. Someone had been inside. Rowena's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. She dialed Celine's number 3 times before the call connected. "They changed my locks," Rowena said, her voice cracking. "Someone was inside my shop." Celine's response came fast. Don't touch anything else. I'm sending someone now. We'll have you back inside within the hour. How did they get in? How did they? Gerald Hoffman owns the building, Ms. Calder. Legally, he has access to the premises for maintenance purposes. He's claiming this was a routine security upgrade. At night? Without telling me. That's what we're going to prove. Stay where you are. The line went dead. Rowena lowered herself onto the concrete step outside her door. The cold seeped through her thin coat. She watched the street slowly wake up around her. A delivery truck rumbled past. A woman walked her dog on the opposite sidewalk. The world kept moving while Rowena sat locked out of everything she had built. 40 minutes later, a locksmith arrived with papers signed by Celine's firm. He drilled through the new deadbolt in under 5 minutes. The door swung open, and Rowena stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Cleaning chemicals. Industrial. Someone had scrubbed the floors, the counters, the windows. Everything gleamed with an artificial shine that felt like erasure. Then she saw what was missing. Her ledger. The handwritten book where she recorded every customer, every repair, every payment for the past 15 years. It had lived in the second drawer of her work table since Emmett was alive. The drawer was empty. Rowena searched everywhere. Under the table. Behind the counter. In the back room where she kept her pressing equipment. The ledger was gone. So were the photographs. The wall behind her register had held 7 framed pictures. Rowena with Emmett on their wedding day. Rowena with her first customer in the shop. Rowena with the church ladies who had kept her business alive during the hard years. All of them. Gone. In their place, the wall held nothing but faded rectangles where the frames used to hang. Rowena sank into her chair. The old sewing machine sat beside her, silent and cold. She reached out to touch it, needing something familiar. The machine didn't respond. She pressed the pedal. Nothing. She checked the power cord, the switch, the tension dial. Everything looked normal, but the machine refused to work. Someone had disabled it. The realization crashed over Rowena like a wave. This wasn't just intimidation. This was destruction. They were taking her records, her memories, her tools. They were erasing the evidence of who she was and what she had built. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "Walk away while you still can." Rowena stared at the screen until the words blurred. Fear pressed against her chest like a hand. These people had power. Resources. Reach. They could enter her shop in the darkness, take what they wanted, and leave without a trace. What could a 72-year-old widow possibly do against that? The bell on her door rang. Rowena looked up, expecting Celine. Expecting help. Instead, she saw Mabel Hutchins standing in the doorway. Mabel was 81 years old. She had been coming to Rowena's shop for alterations since before Emmett died. She brought her church dresses, her granddaughter's prom gowns, her late husband's suits that she couldn't bear to throw away. Mabel was the closest thing Rowena had to family in this neighborhood. And Mabel's face was twisted with something Rowena had never seen there before. Shame. "Rowena," Mabel said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Mabel stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "A man came to see me yesterday. Well-dressed. Polite. He asked questions about you. About your business. About whether you've ever had money troubles." Rowena's stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing bad, I swear. Just the truth. That you work hard. That you're honest. That you never overcharge." Mabel's voice cracked. "But then he asked me to sign something. A statement. He said it was just a formality." "What kind of statement?" Mabel reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it steady. "I didn't read it carefully. I trusted him. He seemed so kind." Tears spilled down Mabel's weathered cheeks. "But my grandson looked at it this morning. He said I signed something that claims you pressured customers for donations. That you took advantage of people's goodwill." Rowena took the paper. The legal language swam before her eyes, but she caught enough. Sworn affidavit. Witness statement. Pattern of financial manipulation. They had turned her oldest friend into a weapon against her. I didn't mean to, Mabel whispered. I didn't understand what I was signing. Rowena, please, you have to believe me. Rowena looked at Mabel's face. The guilt carved into every line. The fear swimming in her eyes. This woman had stood beside Rowena at Emmett's funeral. She had brought casseroles during the hard months. She had prayed for Rowena's shop when the neighborhood started changing. And now she had been tricked into betraying everything. Rowena reached out and took Mabel's hand. I believe you, she said. This isn't your fault. Mabel sobbed. What are we going to do? Rowena looked around her violated shop. The empty walls. The dead machine. The missing ledger. She thought of Cyrus's note. I promise I will stand beside you. She thought of Celine's warning. Thorne has never let federal law slow him down. And she thought of Emmett's voice, steady and sure. Your name is the only thing you truly own. We're going to fight, Rowena said. We're going to tell the truth. And we're going to make them regret ever walking through my door. Mabel wiped her eyes. How? Rowena didn't have an answer yet. But she knew one thing for certain. The hearing was in 36 hours. And Marcus Thorne had just made his biggest mistake. He had turned a kind old woman into a reluctant witness. But reluctant witnesses could change their testimony. Reluctant witnesses could tell the truth about how they were deceived. Rowena picked up her phone and called Celine. We have a new witness, she said. And she's ready to talk. The conference room felt different at midnight. Rowena sat at the long mahogany table, her reflection ghostly in the darkened windows. Celine stood at the whiteboard, markers in hand, mapping out their strategy like a general preparing for battle. Two junior lawyers typed furiously on laptops. A paralegal organized stacks of documents into color-coded folders. The hearing was in 18 hours. Walk me through it again, Rowena said. Celine tapped the whiteboard. Thorne's case rests on 3 pillars. First, he'll argue that Mr. Wainwright was mentally compromised when he created the trust. Second, he'll claim you exerted undue influence over a vulnerable individual. Third, he'll present witness testimony suggesting a pattern of financial manipulation. Mabel's statement. Among others, we've identified at least 2 more affidavits collected by Thorne's team. A former customer named Douglas Briggs claims you overcharged him for alterations 3 years ago. A building inspector named Harold Vance claims your shop has been operating with expired permits since 2019. That's a lie. I've renewed every permit on time. We know, but proving it requires documentation. Celine pointed to a red folder. Which brings us to the missing ledger. Rowena's chest tightened. The ledger contained everything. Payment records. Customer signatures. Dates, times, amounts. 15 years of proof that she had run an honest business. And it was gone. Without the ledger, Celine continued, we can't directly refute the overcharging claims. It becomes your word against theirs. So what do we do? The door to the conference room opened. One of the junior lawyers looked up from his laptop with an expression Rowena couldn't read. Surprise. Something electric. Ms. Maris, he said. We just received something. A package. Delivered to the front desk 20 minutes ago. Celine frowned. From whom? No return address. No sender name. Just this. He held up a brown envelope, thick and heavy. Celine crossed the room and took it carefully. She examined the seal, the postmark, the blank exterior. Then she opened it. Inside was a USB drive. And a single sheet of paper with handwritten words. Celine read the note aloud. Everything Kessler deleted from the corporate servers. Everything Thorne tried to bury. Use it well. No signature. No identification. But Rowena knew. Someone inside Wainwright Holdings had just betrayed their own people. Celine plugged the USB drive into a laptop. The files loaded slowly, each one revealing another piece of the puzzle Thorne had tried to destroy. Internal emails discussing the acquisition timeline for Rowena's neighborhood. Financial projections showing how much Thorne stood to gain from the displacement. Security footage from the board meeting that showed Kessler physically grabbing Cyrus Wainwright and tearing his jacket. And one file that made Celine go completely still. What is it? Rowena asked. Celine turned the laptop so Rowena could see. On the screen was a scanned document. A building permit renewal for Calder Alterations, dated 2019, signed by a city official named Janet Morrison. The same permit Harold Vance claimed didn't exist. They forged evidence, Celine said quietly. Thorne's team created a false paper trail to support their claims. And now we have proof. Rowena stared at the screen. The timestamp on the file showed it had been created 3 days ago. 3 days before the hearing. 3 days after Kessler ransacked her shop. They had manufactured lies to destroy her. And someone had just handed her the tools to expose them. Who sent this? Rowena whispered. Celine shook her head. I don't know. But whoever they are, they just gave us a fighting chance. The next 3 hours blurred together. Lawyers analyzed files. Paralegals cross-referenced documents. Celine made phone calls to experts who could authenticate the footage and verify the timestamps. By 4 a.m., they had built something new. A counter-narrative. Evidence of conspiracy. Proof that Marcus Thorne had orchestrated a coordinated campaign to destroy both Cyrus Wainwright and an innocent seamstress who had committed no crime except kindness. Rowena watched the team work, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes burned. Her hands ached. But something else burned brighter than the fatigue. Celine approached her with a cup of coffee. You should rest. The hearing starts at 10. I can't sleep. Not now. Celine nodded. I understand. She sat down beside Rowena. There's something you should know. Mr. Wainwright sent another message. What did he say? Celine pulled out her phone and read from the screen. He said, tell her that what happened in that shop reminded me of something I forgot. That power means nothing if you use it only to take. She gave without asking. Now I want to give without taking. Whatever happens tomorrow, that doesn't change. Rowena's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. A billionaire she had met once. A stranger she had helped without thinking. And now they were bound together in a fight neither of them had chosen. He's going to be there, Celine said. At the hearing. He insisted. Is that safe? After everything Thorne did to him? Probably not. But he doesn't care. Celine stood. He said something else too. He said Kessler grabbed him in that boardroom because he refused to sign papers that would have displaced over 200 families. He said the tear in his jacket was the price of saying no. Rowena remembered her fingers finding that tear. The way the fabric had split along the shoulder, not from wear but from force. She had fixed a jacket. She had also fixed something inside a man who had forgotten how to hope. The clock on the wall read 4:23 a.m. In less than 6 hours, Rowena would walk into a courtroom and face the most powerful people in the city. She didn't have wealth. She didn't have connections. She didn't have armies of lawyers or political influence. But she had the truth. And sometimes that was enough. Celine's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted. What is it? Rowena asked. Thorne just filed an emergency motion. He's requesting that the hearing be moved up. He wants it to start at 8 instead of 10. Can he do that? He's trying. Celine grabbed her briefcase. I need to make some calls. Get ready, Ms. Calder. They're trying to catch us off guard. She rushed out of the conference room, leaving Rowena alone with the documents and the darkness outside the windows. Thorne was scared. Rowena could feel it now. The unexpected evidence. The anonymous betrayal. The walls closing in on his carefully constructed lies. Scared men made mistakes. And Rowena intended to be there when Marcus Thorne made his. The sun would rise in 2 hours. And with it, the battle of her life would begin. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old paper. Rowena sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded in her lap, watching the room fill with people she didn't recognize. Lawyers in dark suits. Reporters with notebooks. City officials who had probably never set foot in her neighborhood. And across the aisle, Marcus Thorne. He sat like a man who had already won. Silver hair perfectly styled. Tan face relaxed. White teeth flashing as he whispered to his legal team. His eyes swept across the room with the confidence of someone who had never lost anything that mattered. When his gaze landed on Rowena, he smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered his prey. Rowena didn't look away. She held his stare until he broke contact first. Celine leaned close. "Don't let him get to you. He's performing." "I know what he is," Rowena said quietly. "I've known men like him my whole life." The judge entered at exactly 8:03 a.m. Thorne had won his motion to move up the hearing, but the small victory had cost him 2 hours of preparation time. Celine had used every minute. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the validity of the Wainwright Protective Trust," the judge announced. "Counsel for the petitioner may begin." Thorne's lead attorney rose. His name was Wesley Drummond, and he spoke with the polished ease of a man who charged $500 an hour. He outlined the case methodically: Cyrus Wainwright's alleged mental instability, the suspicious timing of the trust creation, the pattern of manipulation that suggested undue influence from an outside party. And then he called his first witness. Mabel Hutchins walked to the stand like a woman approaching her own execution. Rowena watched her old friend settle into the witness chair, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the floor. Mabel had agreed to tell the truth about how she was deceived, but she had also signed that affidavit. The original statement was on record. Drummond approached her with practiced warmth. "Mrs. Hutchins, you've known the defendant for how many years?" 23 years. "And in that time, would you say Miss Calder has ever asked you for money beyond payment for her services?" Mabel hesitated. There were times when she mentioned difficulties. Financial difficulties. "And did she ever suggest that you might help her with those difficulties?" "I don't." "Yes or no, Mrs. Hutchins?" Mabel's voice cracked. "Yes. But not the way you're making it sound." Drummond held up the affidavit. "You signed a statement 3 days ago describing instances where Ms. Calder pressured customers for donations. Is that your signature?" "Yes, but I didn't understand what I was signing." Move to strike. The witness has confirmed the authenticity of the document. The judge nodded. Noted. Continue. Rowena felt her heart sink. Even with Mabel's reluctance, the damage was spreading. The jury, if there had been a jury, would have seen an elderly woman confirming accusations against her friend. But there was no jury, only a judge. And the judge was watching everything with unreadable eyes. Celine rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Hutchins, you said you didn't understand what you were signing. Can you explain what you mean?" Mabel lifted her head. "A man came to my house. Well-dressed. Polite. He said he was gathering character references for Rowena. He said the document was just a formality. He read parts of it aloud, but he skipped sections. I didn't know what the whole thing said until my grandson read it." "Did this man identify himself?" "He gave me a business card. It said his name was Thomas Reardon, representing Wainwright Holdings." Celine walked to her table and picked up a photograph. "Mrs. Hutchins, is this the man who visited you?" Mabel squinted at the image. "Yes, that's him." Celine turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this photograph is of Victor Kessler, head of security for Wainwright Holdings and known associate of Marcus Thorne. Mr. Kessler has been using a false identity to collect witness statements under fraudulent pretenses." The courtroom erupted. Thorne's team objected. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge banged his gavel 3 times. "Order," he commanded. "Counsel approach." Celine and Drummond walked to the bench. Rowena couldn't hear what they said, but she saw Drummond's face redden with anger. Whatever Celine was showing the judge, it was working. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When the attorneys returned to their tables, the judge's expression had hardened. "This court is deeply troubled by the revelation that witness statements may have been obtained through deceptive means. I'm ordering a 30-minute recess while we review the additional evidence submitted by defense counsel." The gavel fell. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Thorne's confident smile had disappeared. His jaw was tight. His eyes kept darting to Kessler, who stood near the back of the courtroom with his arms crossed. Celine touched Rowena's shoulder. "That was round 1. We drew blood. Is it enough?" "Not yet. But we're getting there. During the recess, Rowena stepped into the hallway for air. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reminding her of her shop. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what Emmett's voice sounded like. Steady. Sure. Your name is the only thing you truly own. Miss Calder. Rowena opened her eyes. A man stood before her. Gray suit. Tired eyes that she recognized immediately. Cyrus Wainwright. He looked different from when she had last seen him. Thinner. Paler. The weight of the past week carved into the lines of his face. But he was here. He had come. I wanted to say something before we go back in, Cyrus said quietly. Whatever happens today, I need you to know that I don't regret any of this. You might lose everything. I already lost everything that mattered years ago. The money, the company, the power, none of it made me someone worth being. He paused. But standing in your shop, watching you fix my jacket without asking for anything in return, I remembered something I forgot. That kindness isn't weakness. It's the only strength that lasts. Rowena felt tears pressing against her eyes. I just fixed a jacket. No. Cyrus shook his head. You fixed me. The bailiff called them back inside. Rowena walked into that courtroom with Cyrus Wainwright beside her. Not as a billionaire protecting his investment. Not as a stranger caught in someone else's war. As an ally. As a friend. The hearing resumed. And everything changed. The false witness took the stand at 9:47 a.m. His name was Douglas Briggs, 46 years old, a former customer who claimed Rowena had overcharged him $300 for alterations on a wedding suit. He spoke with rehearsed precision, his story polished and practiced. She told me the job would cost $200, Briggs said. When I came to pick it up, she demanded $500. Said prices had gone up. When I complained, she threatened to keep my suit. Drummond nodded sympathetically. And you never filed a complaint? I didn't want trouble. I just paid and left. The testimony sounded believable. Rowena could see the judge listening carefully, weighing the words. But Celine was ready. Mr. Briggs, she began during cross-examination, you mentioned this incident occurred in September of 2022. Is that correct? That's right. And you paid $500 in cash? Yes. Celine walked to her table and picked up a folder. I have here a receipt from Calder Alterations dated September 14, 2022, for a men's wedding suit. The total charge was $175, paid by credit card. Is this your signature on the customer copy? Briggs's face went pale. That's not. This is also your credit card statement from that month, subpoenaed this morning. It shows a charge of $175 to Calder Alterations on September 14th. No other charges to that business appear anywhere in your history. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, Mr. Briggs, is that you agreed to commit perjury in a federal proceeding. Celine turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to strike this witness's testimony in its entirety and request that the court consider referral for criminal prosecution. The courtroom exploded again. Briggs started shouting that he had been told what to say. Drummond demanded a sidebar. Thorne's face had gone from confident to furious to something approaching fear. The judge called for order. It took 5 minutes for the room to settle. This court will take a 1-hour recess, the judge announced. When we return, I expect counsel to be prepared to address the serious allegations of witness tampering that have emerged during this proceeding. The gavel fell. Rowena sat motionless at the defendant's table, her heart pounding. They had exposed the lies. They had caught Briggs in his deception. But the battle wasn't over yet. Celine appeared beside her. Thorne is panicking. His entire case is falling apart. What happens next? He'll try one more move. He always does. Celine's jaw tightened. We just have to be ready for it. During the recess, Drummond approached Celine with an offer. Settlement. Cash payment to Rowena. Relocation assistance to a new shop in one of Thorne's development properties. Full dismissal of all claims. Celine brought the offer to Rowena. He's offering you a way out, Celine said. New shop, free rent for 5 years, plus $200,000 in cash. All you have to do is drop the protective trust claim. Rowena looked at the paper. The numbers were larger than anything she had ever seen attached to her name. She thought of her old shop. The flickering light. The humming machine. The customers who came through her door needing to look right for moments that could change their lives. She thought of Emmett. She thought of Cyrus, standing beside her in that hallway, saying that kindness was the only strength that lasted. No, Rowena said. Celine nodded slowly. I'll tell them. The hearing resumed at 11:15 a.m. This time, Celine called her own witnesses. Mabel Hutchins returned to the stand, this time armed with the truth about how Kessler had deceived her. Janet Morrison, the city official whose signature appeared on Rowena's legitimate permits, testified that someone had accessed her files without authorization. And then Celine played the footage. The security camera from the Wainwright Holdings boardroom showed everything. 14 board members surrounding Cyrus Wainwright. Papers being pushed across the table. Voices rising. And Victor Kessler grabbing Cyrus by the shoulder, twisting the fabric of his jacket until the seams split. The courtroom went silent. On the screen, Cyrus pulled free and walked out. His face showed no anger. Only exhaustion. Only the weight of a man who had finally reached his breaking point. Celine stopped the footage. Your Honor, she said, this video was recovered from files that Marcus Thorne's team attempted to delete from corporate servers. It shows that Mr. Wainwright was not mentally compromised. He was physically assaulted by his own employees for refusing to sign documents that would have displaced over 200 families from their homes. She turned to face Thorne directly. This trust was not created impulsively. It was created by a man who finally found the courage to say no to corruption. And the only fraud in this courtroom is the case that has been brought against him. Thorne stood abruptly. His composure cracked. This is absurd, he spat. You're going to believe a seamstress over a board of directors? Over financial experts? Over people who have built careers on integrity? The judge's voice cut through like ice. Mr. Thorne, you are not counsel in this proceeding. Sit down. Thorne didn't sit. His face reddened. His fists clenched. People like her, he said, pointing at Rowena, they don't understand how the world works. They think kindness means something. They think playing by the rules matters. But the rules were written by people like me. And they will always protect people like me. The courtroom held its breath. Thorne had just said out loud what everyone suspected. That the system was designed to crush the Rowenas of the world. That power existed only to serve the powerful. And he had said it in front of a judge who had spent 30 years on the bench, watching men like Thorne believe they were untouchable. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Thorne, he said quietly, in my courtroom, the rules protect everyone equally. Including seamstresses. Including widows. Including people who believe that kindness means something. He turned to the bailiff. Remove Mr. Thorne from this proceeding. And notify the district attorney's office that I am recommending a full investigation into witness tampering, document fraud, and obstruction of justice. The bailiff moved toward Thorne. For a moment, it looked like he might resist. Then his shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him. Victor Kessler was already gone, slipped out the back door before anyone could stop him. Thorne was escorted from the courtroom in silence. Rowena sat at the defendant's table, watching a man who had tried to destroy her life being led away in defeat. She had won. The judge ruled in favor of the Wainwright Protective Trust. The emergency injunction was upheld. Rowena's shop and 37 other properties were legally protected from displacement for the next 18 months. The investigation into Thorne's activities would take years. But the first blow had been struck. Celine shook Rowena's hand. You did it. Rowena looked around the courtroom. At the reporters filing out. At the lawyers packing their briefcases. At the empty seat where Marcus Thorne had sat just moments before. No, she said quietly. We did it. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard Emmett's voice. Your name is the only thing you truly own, so don't rent it out for cheap. Rowena Calder had kept her name. And it was worth more than anything Marcus Thorne could ever buy. The bell rang clearly for the first time in years. Rowena looked up from her work table as the door swung open. Morning light poured through the windows, catching the dust motes that floated in the air like tiny stars. The fluorescent light above had finally been replaced. The old sewing machine hummed beside her, restored by a repairman who had refused to accept payment. 3 months had passed since the hearing. The neighborhood still carried its scars. Construction signs dotted empty lots. Luxury condos rose in the distance like monuments to change. But between them, small shops survived. Bakeries, barbershops, tailoring businesses that had stood for generations. Protected, at least for now. Rowena's first customer of the day was a young woman in her 20s, carrying a blazer that had seen better days. "I have a job interview tomorrow," the woman said nervously. "I got this jacket at Goodwill, but the sleeves are too long and there's a tear in the lining. I don't know if it can be fixed." Rowena took the blazer and examined it with practiced eyes. The tear was clean, easily mended. The sleeves could be shortened in an hour. "What kind of job?" Rowena asked. "Administrative assistant at a law firm downtown. It's entry-level, but it could lead to something bigger." Rowena smiled. "Come back at 4. It'll be ready." "How much do I owe you?" Rowena thought of the woman's nervous hands. Her hopeful eyes. The way she clutched that Goodwill blazer like it was her ticket to a better life. "Nothing today," Rowena said. "Just promise me you'll do your best in that interview." The woman's eyes went wide. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Rowena hung the blazer on her rack. "Sometimes people need help. That's what I'm here for." The young woman thanked her 3 times before leaving. The bell rang clearly behind her. Rowena returned to her work table. The morning passed in the rhythm she had known for decades. Hemming pants. Replacing buttons. Letting out seams for bodies that had changed with time. At noon, the bell rang again. Cyrus Wainwright stood in her doorway. He looked different than he had in the courtroom. Healthier. The exhaustion had lifted from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "Ms. Calder," he said, "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You're never interrupting." Rowena set down her needle. "Come in. Sit." Cyrus took the same chair he had sat in 3 months ago, when he had handed her a torn jacket and asked for help. "The trust is holding," he said. "The investigation into Thorne is ongoing. It'll take years, but the evidence is solid. He won't escape this." "And you? What happens to you?" Cyrus smiled. It was the first genuine smile Rowena had ever seen on his face. "I stepped down from the company. Officially. I transferred my shares to a foundation that supports small business owners in displacement zones. The board fought it, but without Thorne leading the charge, they didn't have the votes to stop me." Rowena shook her head slowly. "You gave away a billion-dollar company?" "I gave away something that was destroying me. And destroying people like you." Cyrus leaned back in his chair. "Money used to be the only thing I understood. Accumulate enough of it, and you become untouchable. That's what I believed. But standing in this shop, watching you work, I realized something important." "What?" "That being untouchable isn't the same as being alive." He met her eyes. "You touched me, Miss Calder, with a kindness I didn't deserve. And it reminded me that life isn't measured by what you take. It's measured by what you give." Rowena felt tears pressing against her eyes. She didn't fight them. "My husband used to say something like that," she said quietly. "He said your name is the only thing you truly own, so don't rent it out for cheap." "He sounds like a wise man." "He was the best man I ever knew." They sat in comfortable silence. The sewing machine hummed. The fluorescent light, the new one, cast a warm glow across the room. "I brought something for you," Cyrus said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Rowena opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. Rowena and Emmett on their wedding day, young and hopeful and impossibly in love. "The investigators recovered it from Kessler's office," Cyrus explained. "Along with your other photographs and your ledger. Everything he took has been returned." Rowena pressed the photograph against her chest. The tears fell freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Cyrus stood. "I should let you get back to work. But I wanted you to know something before I left." "What?" I'm opening a foundation in this district. Small grants for business owners who need help with rent, repairs, equipment. We're calling it the Emmett Calder Fund. Rowena's breath caught. What? Your husband built something that mattered. And so did you. I want his name to keep building long after both of us are gone. Cyrus walked to the door. You changed my life with a single act of kindness. Now I want to spend the rest of my life passing that kindness forward. He opened the door. The bell rang clearly. Goodbye, Miss Calder. And thank you. For everything. He stepped outside. The door closed behind him. The shop fell quiet. Rowena sat alone with the photograph in her hands. Emmett's face smiled up at her, frozen in time, forever young, forever hopeful. She had built the shop for him. She had kept it alive for him. And now his name would live on in ways she had never imagined. The afternoon passed gently. Customers came and went. The young woman returned for her blazer and cried when she saw how perfect it looked. A church lady brought in a dress for her granddaughter's baptism. A teenager showed up needing a suit for his first prom. People who needed to look right for moments that could change their lives. At closing time, Rowena walked to the window and looked out at the street. The neighborhood was still changing. It would always be changing. Nothing stayed the same forever. But some things endured. Kindness. Decency. The simple act of helping someone without expecting anything in return. Those things lasted longer than money. Longer than power. Longer than the men who believed they could buy or destroy whatever they wanted. Rowena touched the glass. Her reflection looked back at her, 72 years old, a widow for 12 years, a seamstress who had somehow survived a war she never asked to join. She had been invisible for so long that it started to feel like a law of nature. But she wasn't invisible anymore. Not because she was famous. Not because she had won a legal battle against a billionaire. Not because her name would be attached to a foundation. She wasn't invisible because she finally believed she deserved to be seen. Rowena turned off the lights. She locked the door. A new lock, her own lock, one that would never be changed without her permission. The bell rang one last time as she stepped outside. And somewhere in the distance, the sun was setting over Cleveland, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, promising another day of small kindnesses and ordinary miracles. The story of Rowena Calder wasn't over. It was just beginning. And if you're still listening, I want you to know something. This story happened because one person chose to be kind when it would have been easier to look away. One person decided that decency still mattered in a world that often forgets. You have that same power. Every single day. What will you do with it? If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale like this one. We share stories that inspire, that remind us who we can be, that prove kindness is never wasted. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where a small act of kindness changed everything? I read every single response, and your stories inspire others more than you know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change. Until next time, remember, your name is the only thing you truly own. So don't rent it out for cheap.